The rain had just stopped, leaving a damp chill in the air, when George and Mary Henderson stepped onto the cracked pavement of the millionaire's district. Their coats, worn and frayed, did little to shield them from the lingering cold, yet neither seemed to mind. They moved slowly, carefully, as if each step might bring them closer to something they had only glimpsed in fleeting dreams. George adjusted his scarf, glancing at the auction house with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Mary clutched her handbag a little tighter, her fingers brushing the worn leather as if drawing courage from its familiarity. Inside, the room buzzed with a quiet energy. Auctioneers called out lots, gavel strikes echoed, and bidders leaned forward in anticipation, each vying for items that might unlock wealth, opportunity, or for some nostalgia. Yet George and Mary kept to the back, their presence understated, almost invisible. To the others, they were just two elderly figures in faded coats, quietly observing, not daring to interrupt the rhythm of commerce and excitement. But there was a reason they had come here, one that neither of them had shared with anyone else. They were guided by instinct, by a subtle feeling that whispered, "This is it, today could change everything." Their eyes met briefly, a silent exchange of agreement and courage passing between them. The auctioneer's voice rose, announcing a small lot, a locked metal door from a storage unit nestled among a collection of unremarkable items. It was ordinary, nondescript, yet it radiated an odd allure, an invisible thread pulling at their attention. $500, $800, $1,000. The room was tense with bidding wars for flashier lots, but George and Mary remained calm. Their lives had been reduced to careful calculations, measured risks. The metal door was peculiar, its plain surface hinting at hidden secrets. Neither knew why, yet a magnetic curiosity drew them forward. When the gavel finally dropped, $1,500 later, it belonged to them. The room's chatter carried on, oblivious to the quiet victory of two people who had invested more than money. They had placed their fragile hope into the hands of chance. Walking back to their car, the weight of the purchase settled around them. It was not just a door, it was a threshold to the unknown. The drive home was quiet, punctuated by the occasional hum of tires on wet asphalt. Mary stole glances at George, noting the faint tremor of excitement in his hands. They had no idea what awaited behind that metal barrier, no sense of the hidden world it contained, yet the anticipation was intoxicating. That evening, in the dim light of their modest apartment, the door rested against the wall, silent and unassuming. Its cold metal surface seemed to absorb the room's warmth, holding it at bay, teasing with secrets. Mary reached out, tracing a finger along the edge, imagining what might lie beyond. Forgotten treasures, rare artifacts, perhaps even clues to a life they had only glimpsed in fleeting dreams. George watched her, a soft smile tugging at his lips, sensing the extraordinary in the ordinary, the possibility shimmering just beneath the surface of a simple metal door. And so, with hope tangled in fear, curiosity wrapped in caution, the Hendersons stood at the threshold of discovery, unaware that the events set in motion that day would soon unfold into a story far larger, far more dangerous, and far more remarkable than anything they could have imagined. The next morning, the Hendersons returned to the storage unit with quiet determination. George carried a crowbar, Mary a flashlight, but both were guided by a feeling that something extraordinary lay behind the metal door. The cold surface felt unwelcoming, almost defiant. George's hands trembled slightly as he worked the latch, while Mary held her breath, imagining what could be hidden within. When the door finally creaked open, a thin layer of dust rose like mist. The room smelled of old wood, faded fabrics, and something metallic. At first, it appeared like any ordinary abandoned storage crates stacked haphazardly, shelves sagging under weight, and boxes with labels so faded they were nearly unreadable. Mary noticed something unusual in a corner, a small wooden chest peeking from beneath furniture. She knelt, brushing away dust to reveal detailed carvings and a gleaming lock. George joined her, tracing the intricate patterns with awe. It was craftsmanship far beyond ordinary household items, and both felt a mix of excitement and unease. Why had something so valuable been abandoned? As they explored further, the discoveries multiplied. Old ledgers tied with faded ribbons, documents stamped with official seals, and a crate containing objects that glimmered faintly in the flashlight's beam. Some items were delicate, others mechanical, but each hinted at a story just out of reach. Mary flipped through the ledgers, noticing careful coded handwriting. They suggested accounts, inventories, and hidden transactions. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Normally cautious, the Hendersons were drawn deeper into the mystery, each box raising more questions than answers. They handled every item with care, aware that even minor mistakes could destroy evidence of long-forgotten secrets. Curiosity fueled them, overshadowing fear, though it lingered in quiet corners of their minds. By evening, the unit was a scene of organized chaos: open crates, scattered papers, and carefully handled artifacts. George sank into a chair, exhausted, while Mary cataloged each discovery with precision and trembling excitement. There was a weight in the room, as if the space itself held its breath, aware of the secrets it had guarded. They realized they hadn't just found treasure, they had uncovered pieces of a hidden story, one entwined with wealth, secrecy, and possibly criminal intent. Shadows lengthened as night fell, and though they didn't speak aloud of danger, a silent tension hung in the air. Every artifact hinted at a larger puzzle, one that would soon pull them into events far beyond their ordinary lives. Little did they know, their discovery had already begun to ripple outward, and the quiet storage unit would soon become the center of a web of intrigue, hidden agendas, and high-stakes tension that neither age nor experience could prepare them for. As dusk settled outside, a sense of unease began creeping into the storage unit. The Hendersons had been so absorbed in cataloging the objects that they hadn't noticed faint footsteps echoing in the corridor beyond the metal door. George paused mid-note, straining to hear while Mary's hand froze on a ledger. The sound was deliberate but soft, almost as if someone was testing the room for signs of life. The couple exchanged a glance, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Whoever was approaching clearly didn't belong here. George tightened his grip on the crowbar and Mary quietly moved closer, shielding the more delicate items. They were no longer merely uncovering forgotten belongings, they were standing at the threshold of someone else's hidden world, and that world might not welcome intruders. Suddenly, a low creak came from the far end of the corridor. The Hendersons froze, every instinct screaming caution. A shadow flitted past the edge of the doorway, just enough to confirm their suspicion. They were not alone. Whoever had been here before them was still watching, still guarding, and likely aware that someone had dared to open the metal door. Mary whispered that they needed help. George hesitated. Calling authorities might expose the items to seizure, but ignoring the danger felt reckless. The ledger in Mary's hand revealed a disturbing detail. Several entries indicated objects marked for clandestine transfer, potentially stolen goods. This wasn't just a storage unit. It was a hidden operation, long abandoned but not necessarily forgotten. Determined to protect what they had found, the Hendersons decided to continue, moving cautiously from crate to crate. They examined a set of old documents stamped with maritime insignias, identifying them as shipment records tied to luxury cargo. Each paper suggested layers of secrecy, hints of fraud, and connections to powerful individuals who would not take kindly to an uninvited audience. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by distant echoes from the hallway. Every sound amplified their fear, every shadow suggested movement. The couple worked efficiently, but nervously, cataloging, photographing, and occasionally whispering theories about the item's origins. One crate revealed antique watches with engraved initials, each more intricate than the last. Another contained sealed envelopes, the contents hidden yet promising revelations if opened carefully. Then George noticed a fresh footprint near the doorway, a small, deliberate imprint that hadn't been there when they arrived. Their hearts raced. Someone had entered after them. The realization was chilling. They were being watched, and this observer knew the value of what lay inside. Every choice from that moment on carried risk. A misstep could alert a dangerous party. Mary suggested they leave immediately, but George's curiosity, mixed with a cautious bravery, compelled him to continue. They needed answers. As the night deepened, the shadows grew longer, the room colder, and the sense of unseen eyes pressing closer intensified. The Hendersons had entered a story far larger than themselves, where each discovery drew them deeper into a web of intrigue, theft, and secrecy. And in the distance outside the storage facility, someone was taking careful notes of every light, every movement, every shadow. The hunt had begun. A sudden clatter echoed through the storage facility, and George instinctively stiffened, glancing toward the dimly lit aisles. Shadows shifted like restless ghosts, and for the first time the couple realized the danger of what they had uncovered. The items in the unit weren't just forgotten valuables, they were evidence of something far larger, something illegal. Their hearts pounded, but Mary squeezed his hand, a quiet anchor in the rising storm of fear. They moved cautiously, stepping over crates and old furniture, each item whispering its own story. An ornate chest drew their attention next, its lock rusted yet surprisingly sturdy. George fiddled with the key they had found earlier, the metal scraping against the ancient mechanism until with a soft click it opened. Inside, stacks of documents, old ledgers, and photographs revealed connections to distant ports and mysterious transactions. Each page seemed to deepen the mystery, suggesting a web of organized crime that had been hidden in plain sight. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps drew closer. The couple froze, realizing someone else had entered the facility. Fear mingled with adrenaline as they ducked behind a towering pile of crates. Peering through the gaps, they saw a figure moving deliberately, scanning the aisles with a cautious intensity. It wasn't a worker or a fellow bidder, it was someone with a purpose, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. George whispered a plan, his voice low but steady. They couldn't confront the stranger, not yet. They needed evidence, documentation that could protect them if things turned violent. Mary nodded, her face pale but resolute. Together, they retrieved the most incriminating files and photographs, carefully tucking them into a worn briefcase. Each movement was measured, deliberate, a quiet dance of survival and courage. Time seemed to stretch, every second waited with tension. The stranger paused near another unit, muttering something under their breath, then turned and left, unaware that the couple had already secured the key evidence. George exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing just slightly. Mary smiled faintly, a glimmer of hope in her tired eyes. They had risked everything, and now finally they had something tangible, proof of secrets buried for decades. The drive home was silent but filled with a sense of cautious triumph. The city lights flickered past as the couple reflected on the day's events. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the unknown, yet they emerged with more than just a discovery. They had reclaimed a sense of purpose. George and Mary knew the road ahead would be complex. Authorities, legal hurdles, and possible threats awaited. But they also knew they had each other, and that was a strength that no criminal network or hidden danger could undo. That evening, as they placed the briefcase on their dining table, a quiet excitement settled over them. The locked metal door had been the gateway, not just to hidden valuables, but to a story that could change lives and bring hidden truths to light. For George and Mary Henderson, what began as a desperate gamble had evolved into a journey of courage, revelation, and a renewed belief that even in the twilight of life, extraordinary discoveries await those willing to take a leap into the unknown.